This podcast is a project of the Medina Focus, with the goal of providing space for collaboration and community among practitioners to the Muslim diaspora in North America. As people around the world have immigrated to the West, many Christians have realized that they live and work in the midst of the nations, and they often feel alone and unprepared to communicate cross-culturally. If you're looking for conversation and community surrounding issues of loving Muslim friends in Jesus' name, we welcome you into the conversation.
Hello everyone, it's Brian and Nate here, welcoming you back to another episode of the Medina Focus podcast. Today we've got a very unusual topic, and that's one of the exciting things about this program is that we get to talk to so many interesting and diverse people that are in very different kinds of ministry and different areas of the country and sectors of society. And today we're going to turn our attention to meatpacking plants. That's right, I said meatpacking plants. And if you've ever gone through any of the big beef states, you might have pulled through towns like Amarillo and other small towns that have, huge meatpacking facilities, whether it's, chicken or beef or pork. And if you're on the highway, a lot of times we just, drive by real fast, maybe without thinking about it. I know I don't often pass meatpacking plants where I live. I live in a big city, and so they tend to put these in smaller towns. But did a little bit of research this week, and I learned that there's almost 500,000 people who are in the meatpacking industry, 500,000 people, just about, and 40% of that 500,000 are migrant workers. And in particular places, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, they can be upwards of 58, 66% respectively. That's a figure from the Migration Policy Institute. And so today, the meatpacking industry has the 5th highest concentration of refugee workers. So let that sink in for a moment. If you want to work side by side with refugees, the 5th highest concentration in terms of industry would be meatpacking plants. There have been a lot of stories during COVID, since meatpackers were defined as essential workers and oftentimes don't have access to the best medical care or legal counsel for that matter. Oftentimes they worked through the pandemic and also where they live on the socioeconomic scale. They're required to work. They can't take time off really for any reason. And so because of this, a high percentage of them also were kind of the first line to catch COVID and really not be able to stay home and work it off. So it's a very interesting sector that I think God is going to use. In my own town, I've noticed there are particular people groups that gravitate towards meat packing. And, we might have 1,000 of this people group in our city. And 10 years ago, we had 1,000. 10 years ago from now, we'll have 1,000. And it's just that they move into town and then they move out relatively quickly, and they go on to one of these, smaller towns that you might think of, this is just, kind of a little country town. And yet these little tiny country towns now have very diverse populations. So what a great opportunity for the churches and the Christians in those areas. So today we have 2 very special guests joining us as we talk about what God is doing in this very unique ministry. We have Joe. He is working, he's serving Christ among the African immigrants in the North, and he's been married for 30 years, and he and his wife have 4 children. We're also joined today by Fred, who's the director and pastor of New Roots Ministry in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. The ministry motto for New Roots Ministry is a springboard for new Americans and their churches. He's married to his wife for 31 years, and they have 3 daughters and 4 grandchildren, and he's currently working on a doctor of ministry with a basic focus on expanding effective, engaging gospel conversations among all peoples. So Joe and Fred, welcome to the program.
Good to be with you, Brian.
Hey, so you guys are working in meat packing plants in the heartland of the U.S. and you're working among Muslims that are working in these plants. I'm wondering, are Muslims actually being resettled in your cities, or are they moving there from other places for job opportunities, or how are the Muslims getting to these places?
Yeah, in my city, the Muslims are actually moving from other cities. We are in a rural setting, and nearby where we live, there is a big city with lots of Muslims. So a lot of them that have moved over to our small town, when we talk to them, they are what comes out is, oh, we love it here because it's more peaceful and it's not a big city, so they come for that peace and tranquility of our small town farmland area. The city is around 3,000 people, and I think from recent statistics in the downtown area, around a quarter, 1 out of every 4 people in that small town or village, whatever you want to call it, is an immigrant from this particular country in Africa. So it's a big population.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I'm from a city, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, has about 190,000 people. And it would be the biggest city, I guess, kind of a hub, I guess, 3 or 4 hours away from Minneapolis, Omaha, 5 hours from Des Moines, Iowa, I guess. And so it's quite a hub, and some good industry, and really, and also has a strong presence of the Lutheran Social Services, their Center for New Americans. So they are really the refugee receiving agency for the state of South Dakota. And so that has drawn a pretty good number of refugees over the years. Some of those then, although I would say probably a minority of the refugees within this city have come as Muslim people, more than would be Christians. But some have come as Muslims. A few I can think of from like countries such as Ethiopia, Sudan, Bosnia for sure. Others have come. I don't think they originally came to South Dakota as refugees, like directly to South Dakota, but they came from neighboring Minnesota, and that would be more like Somali people, and so there would be some of those here. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you guys work in meatpacking plants, or you're working with people who are working in meatpacking plants, and that's probably something that the average American has never thought much about or stepped foot in, and yet, here you are serving as chaplains. And I think the whole idea of corporate chaplains in any field is kind of unique and new, but, I certainly had no idea that meatpacking plants had chaplains. What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, for about, I think, 11 years now, my ministry, the predecessor before me at this ministry, had a connection at the meat plant somehow, I think through his son originally, and they were having this is a meat plant with about 3,500 employees, and it is a pork plant, interestingly, all pork, and they were having some unrest between the ethnicities. And they had asked my predecessor to be there for that reason, to try to help out as a chaplain. And so for the last 10 or 11 years, we have had a presence there. I've been doing this for about 5.5 years. I'm there about 17 hours a week. And I'm right in I would say 15 hours a week at the plant, on the production floors, in the break rooms, greeting new hire groups, which in a large plant like this can be 30 people a week. And just really being available. Yes, as a chaplain, they allow me to be a pastor, to pray with people, to listen. I share the gospel with people respectfully, as I would do anywhere. I'm welcoming and interested in anybody who works there. I would say a lot of my work, though, is kind of like a social worker, too. Really trying to meet people's felt needs And oftentimes that's where maybe a relationship can develop, where they maybe share more and ask more, and that can lead to learning more about their life and having prayer. And so there you go. It's been a real blessing, and they pay us, our ministry, for being there. That's nice too.
So I want to just ask a quick follow-up question. There's one glaring thing that you said in your description there that probably everyone who's our listener and knows a little bit about Muslim culture just probably sat back in their chair and said, wait, what? So this is a pork meat packing plant, and you're working with Muslim peoples. Help us get our minds around that.
Yeah, surprising to me too when I started as a chaplain there and finding how many Muslims do work there. And I'm going to say it's not a large number. I would say there would. I wouldn't know how many of the 3,500 would be Muslims. I'm going to think maybe 300, roughly. And it really depends on which country they're from. I have some dear Somali friends who would not even think about working at this meat plant, this pork plant. I know a couple of guys that were from that country, and they worked there as short as they could before they moved on to something else.
Right.
But I maybe I shouldn't say other countries beyond that, but there are some of my Muslim friends at the pork plant, not from the country I just mentioned. And they would say, well, it's Muslim tradition, or I don't know if they've even said it's in the Quran or the Hadith, where if we need to work and that's the only option we have to provide a living, we just can't eat the meat. And so, and then I would say there would be, I can think of a group of Muslim employees from another country where, their Muslim religion for themselves, they largely identify as Muslims. They really don't practice it a lot. And so they seem to not have a problem working there as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I in the course of my previous occupation, I came in contact with chicken plants. And it definitely, if you were not allowed to eat that meat, to work in the plant would be quite a task. I would think that'd be kind of a challenging thing. So, Joe, what are you doing in the meat packing plant that you're working there? Are you working yourself in the plant?
Yeah, personally don't work in the plant. I work with people who work in the plant. So the plant, I don't know exactly how many people work there, but majority of people who work there are from this particular country. We work with just one people group. They're from one particular country in Africa, and majority of them are Muslims. So practically everybody in this town from that particular country in Africa professes to be a Muslim. We have a few Christians that have come to know Christ over the past 10 years or so, which is something exciting. But what we do is we just build relationships with this particular people group, and we have a lot of things we use for that. For example, we teaching them English. So we have what is known as ESL, English as a Second Language. So we have like 5 or 6 classes, which throughout the week, different hours, because we have 3 shifts. So there's some classes in the morning and some in the evening. So those people who are in the second shift can go to the morning classes. And then we also, just befriend them and visit them in their homes. Some of the women visit their fellow women from this country into their homes and coach them, just be their friends and be there, teach them English and teach them the culture and teach them the language and just, help them to feel comfortable in this country. And our main goal is that one day there will be a church or a fellowship of these people groups that will be worshiping Christ. And so that's our goal, and we just use all these things as a tool. And we have other things, some of us substitute, teach, we just have volunteers that work with us. I'm the director of this organization in this town, but we have people from different churches that volunteer. And those, in our state, if you have bachelors in anything, you can substitute. So we substitute in the local schools, and that opens up, opportunity to meet the younger generation as they come up, high school kids, and some of them ask me, hey, why are you not a Muslim? And I have opportunity of hearing the reason why I'm not a Muslim. And so it's been exciting. So we're excited about what God is doing here.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So Brian and I are oftentimes talking to people in the workplace where there are Christians working alongside Muslims, and we are really interested in seeing opportunities to get people in the marketplace to kind of reach out. Has that been the case in the meatpacking plants that you guys are working in? Have you, no doubt that there are Christian workers working alongside the Muslims. Do they ever take the opportunity to reach out? Has that been a focus?
I'll speak on that a moment. I can think of a few employees who are, devout Christians. A few. Yeah, I would say probably 5 or 6 of them would actually. They've been able to take a permanent marker and write on their, like 2 of these guys drive a forklift type of machine, or a mule they call it, and nothing but the blood of Jesus, for example, on the back of some. I can think of another guy. He's got we call it kind of he uses a knife, so it's not a frock, but it's another thing. But he'll almost like write verses on there, different, and his must be an erasable type of marker because it's different each day, seems like. And he actually would almost try to be preaching in the break rooms, which they did could have put a kibosh to that. But I would say that's definitely the minority of Christians at the plant who do that. I think now a lot of them probably feel like it's just not the place to do that very much, and truly. There's not that many Muslim employees, and I don't know that they all know which ones they would be, are Muslims. I think that in Christian society, and just really among all Christians, so often we aren't very good at conversing with people of other faiths and backgrounds. So I think in the meatpacking plant as well, the Christian employees don't do that a whole lot, besides a few more bold believers that I mentioned. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In my situation, I think there are few that may venture to share, but most people probably are scared because we are not taught in our churches how to reach to these people, Muslims especially. There's movies made on how to reach or how to share with atheists, and we know how to deal with Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons, but really it's hard to know how to deal with Muslims. So I think what's lacking is the teaching, and that's what I have been doing in several churches. When I'm invited to go, I share what the Muslims believe. Because you ask a Muslim, do you love Jesus? They tell you, of course I love Jesus, because Isa, the prophet Isa, is mentioned in the Quran many times. And in fact, I've been told by some Muslim friends that they love Jesus more than I do love Jesus, because when they say that name Isa, they follow it, blessed, peace be upon him. So they say, we revere him, we love him more than you guys do. So, and when somebody told that who doesn't really know Islam, the first reaction is to, you're scared. And or something, we are scared of them. Most of us Christians, we are scared of them. So we just need to get to know them as friends, and then get to know what you believe, And of course, we can give our testimony, but sometimes, we need to go deeper than that. But I'm glad there are some people who are reaching out to them. I wouldn't say that nobody's reaching, and God can use anything. If we just give him the little we have, he can multiply that. So I just encourage people to keep reaching the Muslims with the gospel.
So, guys, I live in a pretty decent-sized city, and we have about 25% of our city is foreign-born. And so if you come here from around the world, you kind of just blend in with everybody. But we have several different people groups. I think a lot of the people groups you're working with, they come to our city, and they might stay for 3 months, and then they move on, and they're going to work in a meatpacking plant. And some of the ones I've talked to, they have this real fear that, in Houston, they can just kind of blend in like everybody else. And they're kind of worried about, if I go to a small town, how will I be received? And so kind of outside the meatpacking plant, socially speaking, how does the community receive these immigrants?
So Sioux Falls has changed quite a lot in the last several years, but still it's certainly a majority would be Caucasian people. I don't know what percentage that is. And I guess I have not really asked a refugee, and plenty of the refugees in Sioux Falls are also from Asia. A lot of Nepal, maybe Nepali and Bhutanese people who also work at the meat plant. I haven't really asked them how well they are received in this city. I would imagine it's not as well as I would want it to be, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
And now this meatpacking plant that I work at, 3,500 people, 85% of the employees are non-U.S. born. So it's hugely important that the refugees, a large number, and immigrants have come to the United States, because the plant would be in trouble. And they have really been good employees. They do stay, plenty of them 5+ years. And now with the numbers being lower, I won't go too long on this, but the numbers being lower in the last few years of refugees coming, the plant's struggling on getting employees who stay, because the turnover is typically pretty high in a plant like that. Natural attrition, and to replace those has been difficult.
Yeah. Joe, what about you? How are they received in your community?
Yeah, in my community, I think they are pretty well received. People here are very friendly to them, and I think for majority, I'm not saying everybody, of course, I've spoken to some churches and just mentioned verses that God brings refugees to our doorsteps, not that, he was not surprised and by these refugees coming to our community, and that was all in his design. And after that, somebody came and told me, you know what, thank you for sharing that, because that really made me change my mind about these people. So I think people are learn to accept people who are different. But on the other hand, talking to this people group, I'm also trying to get both sides to learn and to grow in accepting each other, because people also have this idea, the people I'm working with, they're from Africa, they have this idea that all Caucasians are racist. And this weekend somebody told me that, and we after a lengthy discussion, he told me, I'm sorry I was wrong, because people are, you can't judge just the whole community or the whole people group by just what you think, that something that has been something in your mind that just say that they are racist, but you don't really have any specific example to give, or anybody that has done anything to you to show that they are racist. So the thing that maybe makes a lot of the locals in my town complain a little bit is the fact that the immigrant people do not want to assimilate to the culture. Somebody could have moved to the U.S. 20 years ago but cannot even converse in English or say my name is so and so. They are insular. They stay together. They go to their own restaurants. When they're at work, the supervisor is from their community, and when they need something, there is a translator. So that kind of rubs people the wrong way because they are just on their own. The community, and especially the company they're working for, has bent backwards and can give them 3 months of vacation so they can go back to their country and come back and still find their job paid for them. And I'm like, you guys are so privileged. Which company would give you 3 months and you go home? But so those are just things to show that, they're really accepted here. And so we're thankful for that.
Do either of you get a sense that they're more receptive to the gospel coming here?
As far as Muslims that I have come in contact with, I have not seen that, Brian. As far as an openness to the gospel more than maybe what they would have been back there. I didn't know them at their home country originally, but that's just my sense. I'm working on a lot lately. I have quite a few Muslim friends, and I really enjoy spiritual interaction. What I do find is we can have very cordial conversation, and but so often, it's kind of respectfully clarifying our differences. And then as Joe said, yes, they believe it. They highly respect Isa. I'll certainly use the word Isa and the Injil of the New Testament, and those words that but it quickly becomes, this is what I believe about Isa, and they will say, this is what I. But I am trying to learn to to cross those bridges, but certainly they are open to spiritual conversation, yes. But maybe not the warm, authentic testimony sharing, I guess, at this time.
Yeah, in my case, if I could just jump in my case, I agree with Fred there that they are, in general, they are not like begging to come to church with me, but as I've built relationships and friendship with them, and they know that I am not just interested in them converting, but I'm interested to them as a person. We go to a different level, and at that point, we've been able to have some very fruitful discussions on one-to-one. When I have like 3 of them or 4 of them, then it becomes a little complicated because they are not free to share. But I have 2 or 3 friends that when I'm with them one-to-one, we can discuss topics that are very, very tough. And sometimes, they have told me that I do not respect the prophet, their prophet, of course, not my prophet, because I studied a lot and learned a lot about the Islamic religion, and I've read a lot about the hadiths, from the hadiths and the Quran and all that. And I asked them tough questions. Basically it's just a matter of building relationships and proving that you're a friend and that you're there for them. And when that happens, I think they are pretty much open to hear. If they become Christians, I don't know if that will ever happen, but I pray for them that they come to know the Lord. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a couple that came to know the Lord. Actually, 3 people that have come to know the Lord in the last 10 years. One just came to know the Lord like a year ago, just when COVID started. and was baptized. So it's baby steps. It's like a marathon, but the Lord is doing things, and the community here knows about these conversions. So basically, they know that you can be from that community and be a Christian. Because before that, most of them thought to be from that community, you have to be Muslim. So they are seeing that it's possible to be from that community and be a believer in Jesus Christ.
I would say a lot depends on where and their country, their home country, and therefore oftentimes their type of Islam. I can think of some from a certain country that I'll say where we can have spiritual conversation, but they seem to almost control the conversation a bit more. This is, where you are wrong. and we can have a cordial conversation in that way. I'm learning that. The other side of the spectrum, and then I'll talk about a little in the middle, but there would be, I can think of an Eastern European country that is largely Muslim, not as authentically Muslim in the way of going to the mosque each Friday. And so, however, basically that's my ethnicity and my identity, but let's not talk anymore about it. They do not like to have spiritual conversation because a lot of the war in their country was divided on the lines, whether you were Muslim or Christian.
Right.
And in that place, the Muslims were very sadly, brutally killed, many of them. And then there's some more in the middle of this that would be very interested in having conversations, and we have conversation, and would even be more open than those other two I just mentioned, and prayer, and receiving prayer, and interested in, as I kind of maybe share a Bible verse and about Jesus, and so that has been easier in a lot of ways. So it really depends. A lot of myself too. I think sometimes I try to get background information on, but then I feel like sometimes I'm setting myself up for, if I have too much background information, then I'm assuming what they are probably thinking, and it limits my conversation. So I'm trying to learn, even as I do my D-Min studies, about just coming to them authentically and maybe not wanting to know so much that it actually can hamper my discussion.
Yeah, sometimes we study Islam in a book or in a class, and we just make an assumption about, well, they're all this way, and when we get to know the people themselves, oftentimes they're quite different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have heard it said that it's almost like there's two dials, and one of those dials can be set to low or high in terms of the Muslim identity. How much do they identify with the religion of Islam? And then the other dial is high or low setting for their practice. How much do they practice Islam? And in each area of the world, you can have a different setting, and depending on that, it'll make a difference on how receptive they are. But even then, you still have to cope with the people's individual story and their own personal background. So yeah, it's like anything, we're all a specific. It's almost like we need that key to fit into the padlock of our heart that fits perfectly, right? So we need spiritual guidance on how to go about doing that. So it's good to be responsive to the Holy Spirit. So I know that one of the things, right now it seems like the world is really bleak. There's a lot of bad news. It seems like everything's falling apart. And I know our listeners would just be encouraged to hear a good story from each of you. Can you tell us your favorite story about something that happened in your ministry that puts a smile on your face every time you think about it and brings you hope?
Yeah, I would say that, amidst all the bad news and all the difficulties in ministry, as I mentioned, we had one man accept the Lord recently, and it was this one had been reached or had been given a Bible many years ago back in his home country by a missionary, and this missionary, I'm sure you probably never know because the Bible he gave to this guy when he was young back in his home country. This guy kept reading the Bible, and that kind of made him start doubting what he was being told in the mosque by the imams and by the sheikhs. And he came to the States, and just like I mentioned, God moves people so that they may at least seek after him, as the book of Acts say. So he came to the U.S. and he met us, our volunteers, and he came for English classes because he wanted to improve on his English. And when he realized we were Christians, he whispered into our ears kind of that he wanted to learn more. So we started reading the Bible with him and explaining things. He had a lot of questions, why is this that way, and why is that this way? And we explained to him, and after many years, maybe 3 or 4 years of us, a lot of us, different people in our organization, our volunteers reading the Bible and explaining things, he professed Christ, and he made it public. And it did go very well with his community, but he said, you know what, I want to stand for Christ, and he got baptized, and that was quite an encouraging thing, after all these years of praying and sharing the gospel, just to see the fruit was refreshing to our team. So that's an encouraging thing when one soul comes to Christ and is snatched from the flames of hell, and now his name is in the book of life. And that missionary that gave him the Bible back in his country may never know this side of eternity, but one day in heaven, I'm sure they're going to shake hands and give each other a big hug and say, thank you for giving me that Bible in those dusty streets in Africa. That Bible spoke volumes in my life and brought me to Christ.
That's great, and it was it's a story that reaches across the continent, and that one person planted overseas and you harvested here. That's amazing.
I'll talk about 3 guys that they're all originally, I'll just say, from Ethiopia. That's where they are from, and they're in our city. And all 3 of them came to know Jesus in a refugee camp in Kenya before they came to the U.S. 2 of them kind of continue to have. I mean, Abdallah is kind of cool. Everyone's all, oh, he's Muslim, but no, he's Christian, and he kind of keeps the name because it's a conversation piece for him sometimes. I can think of another friend, he has gone to more of Muhammad has become, not now, but I sometimes say, both those guys came to know the Lord. And one other story would be, a friend of mine, she owns a store, and I was just walking around. I like to go into different stores and shop. And she has become a dear friend, and her husband and her 2 daughters, and they are a Muslim family. And she would be one of those, maybe I'd say a country or her spirituality on the middle of the spectrum, very interested in conversation. She often says, and her personality is such that she's hard to talk spirituality with in a way. She's got a strong personality, and she jumps in, on the conversation, but she sometimes says, Fred, we believe the same, and then we try to have these conversations. But she has been so open to having me bring groups of people to serve in her store and help. We go to other stores that right across the street. You're a Somali friend who has a store, but she will always welcome groups to come and help, and she talks and makes wonderful coffee. and from that, we've been able, we do teach driver training for new Americans, and we've been able to help her daughter with that. I've got to know her husband well, and it's just great connections. And I do believe her belief, her understanding of Islam is not strong like some of those. That's why she sometimes says, Fred, we believe the same. Because I will say, Jesus, died on the cross, and he's the Son of God, and she'll seem to agree with me. And so maybe it's, I haven't kind of come down to she just Muslim by ethnicity. But I really believe in God is doing some real transformational work in her home. And that's been so fun to see. But she's just become a dear friend.
Well, Fred and Joe, we want to give you a big thank you for coming on the show and taking time and sharing your stories with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure, Brian and Nate.
You've been listening to the Medina Podcast. This show is hosted by Brian Hebert and produced by Nate Schultz. The conversations we have on this program are born out of an expanding environment of collaboration among grassroots ministry practitioners across the North American continent. If you would like to engage on a deeper level, please email us at medinafocus@vision59.com.